If you have followed my channel for a while, you know I thoroughly enjoy photographing the big epic vistas and dramatic landscapes, but over the past couple of years I have found a great joy in photographing my local landscapes and everyday scenes. The question is, what does it take to get great and satisfying photos from mundane landscapes? I'll dive into this topic in this video and hopefully inspire you to get those special photos from your local landscapes. First and foremost, I completely acknowledge that most of the photos that do well online are the big epic vistas from Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Patagonia, Western US and so on. It is very hard to avoid being influenced by these photos. Most of us wish we could go to these places and take these amazing photos ourselves. After all, who wants to photograph a stupid little birch tree when you can photograph a waterfall in a storm running back up the mountain? And that is the first thing you need to change, your mindset. You need to learn to appreciate the mundane, and that can be hard. Whereas I had a longing to get out to those epic destinations just a few years ago to photograph all those exotic landscapes, I've grown much more fond of staying home than I did back then. It's at home I relax, and at home I feel the most comfortable. Although I'm not a person who flourishes in an environment of competition, I have always strived to do better, to do something new, at least for myself. Repeating the same things over and over again just becomes boring. So instead of going to all those big, epic, iconic locations where the landscape does the job for you, which of course can be liberating, I've found that I've also come to thoroughly enjoy and find a lot of satisfaction in making really great photos from scenes that nobody else photographed and scenes that are not obvious for landscape photography. Getting that one great and unique photo where you've done the entire process from researching, scouting, shooting, editing to getting your print and hanging it on the wall is just so rewarding. And when you can combine that process with having a photo of a landscape you can relate to, it is, at least for me, an even greater feeling. The next step in the process is to find your everyday scene that you want to photograph. Now, I obviously know that I have a global audience and my everyday scenes are not your everyday scenes. But Denmark is predominantly covered by rural landscapes with cities and towns. We do of course also have forests that are acceptably big with a fair variety of trees. We have long stretches of beaches, lakes, fjords, heathlands, hills and historic monuments, but the point is Denmark isn't known as a landscape photography destination. Either I try to find those special scenes or subjects in the mundane landscape, some special trees, an iconic lighthouse, a particularly aesthetic hilltop, a lone church, or just something that stands out in the landscape. This approach requires a good amount of research on Google and a good amount of legwork to explore different areas. Another approach I've become very happy about is to find areas where I think there must be a potential for a photograph without knowing exactly what I want to photograph, and then go when the weather is interesting. In the latter case, I usually seek out dynamic landscapes with trees, open patches, ponds, lakes, streams, forest sections, lone trees, heath areas, hills and so forth. A great example of such a landscape was the one I visited in my Stop Making These Photography Mistakes video from a few weeks back. Here I had exactly what I mentioned above, generally landscapes with a lot of variety within a short distance. I can also benefit from the rural landscapes, but I've already made a specific video on that topic, so check that one out afterwards. When out photographing, I prefer to avoid human elements like cars, electricity poles, chimneys and so forth. However, for me, I don't mind more romanticist-esque elements like churches, houses, half-timbered houses, mills, old roads, ruins, castles, generally everything with a vibe of old I find to work fine in a landscape photograph. I don't mind people in my photos either. In both the big vistas and my more local photography, humans work great to show scale, adventure and storytelling. No matter what part of landscape photography you want to do, make sure you get the composition right. Balance, clean edges, straight horizons, visual flow, negative space and the use of a focal point are all compositional tools you need to know about and use accordingly to up the aesthetic quality of your photos. I have covered all these extensively on my channel, and if you want to know even more about composition, be sure to get my 2 ebooks, Landscape Composition 1 and 2. In these ebooks I cover a range of different compositional tools. I use minimal text and loads of photos as examples as to get to the point fast. In the final chapter of each ebook I bring it all together and analyze some of my own photos using these tools. Be sure to check out the ebook via the link in the description. Since the mundane landscapes doesn't do the job for you, you have to depend on other means. Those other means are either the weather, time of day, or the season you choose to shoot in. Different subjects and scenes work better in different weather, at specific times of day, or during a specific season. I use a whole range of weather apps to predict the weather, which I have already covered a couple of times on this channel. There's no doubt that I highly benefit from the weather in my photos. Whether it is a stormy day with dramatic light, as in these 2 photos, or it is an atmospheric morning with fog or mist, the weather plays a key part in capturing interesting photos in mundane landscapes. Take these photos as examples. None of them show a particularly interesting landscape in themselves, but due to the atmospheric morning conditions and light, they all come alive. They wouldn't have been half as interesting if it wasn't for the fog or mist in combination with the light. And that is really the main secret, if you want to call it that. Atmosphere like fog and mist in combination with different kinds of light. That is how I usually get the best photos from mundane landscapes. If you enjoyed this video up until this point, I'd highly appreciate both a like and a comment, as they greatly help to spread this video to even more landscape photography interested people out there in the world. And of course, subscribe for even more videos and follow me on both Twitter and Instagram, where I also release my photos. Be sure to stay to the end of the video, where I have a Black Friday/Cyber Monday offer. So besides the weather, I cannot overstate how important benefiting from the seasons is. Depending on the scene, figure out what season of the year you like it the best, and figure out if there are any seasonal benefits to a specific scene. Rural landscapes are generally most interesting during summer, forest floors with wild garlic bloom during May, heath areas with heather bloom during August. Then there is of course autumn colors in forests and snow during winter. Astronomical phenomenons also has their calendars, such as the shape of the Milky Way is different from spring and autumn. Another seasonal thing to be aware of is animals. During breeding season, some areas may be closed off, some areas you should not fly your drone. Then there is hunting season to take into consideration, and some areas become so full of insects it's not even fun to go shooting. A more practical thing I've learned is that you still need to simplify your scene when photographing in mundane landscapes. Mundane landscapes can actually be fantastic for minimalist photos, but in general, no matter what you photograph, whether a lone tree on a field or a forest scene, you still want to keep the scene simple and not include elements that doesn't benefit the photo. Here I'm especially talking about avoiding distractions along the edges and corners of your frame. The best way to avoid these are first and foremost to be aware of them and adjust position accordingly in the field. Another thing I found is that the majority of my landscape photography from Denmark has been photographed with a focal length above 35mm. Using longer focal lengths helps to both simplify the scene but also benefit from perspective compression. If you want to know more about how I use long lenses, be sure to check out all my videos on that topic. So long lenses for mundane landscapes usually work really well. To make the mundane landscapes more living, I've also found I really like to include animals. They can either work as the focal point, be a big part of the storytelling or the feeling of the photo I want to come across, or just that little extra spice to up the aesthetics and sense of nature. Something as simple as ducks paddling around in the morning mist makes for great photos. Cows, horses and sheep are also very welcome in my landscape photos, although it does not happen as frequent as with birds. When it comes to everyday scenes, I tend to lean towards a more realistic look. My end goal is often for the viewer to feel they're standing in a realistic position in the scene and observing what I am photographing. Ultra wide angle focal lengths and odd angled perspectives has a tendency to work against that goal, so I usually try to avoid those. And it's the same case with my editing. When I edit the everyday scenes from Denmark, I also tend to lean towards a more realistic look. That doesn't mean the photos can't be dramatic or contrasty. Nature actually often is, especially if you manage to capture it in interesting light. Whether you want to make a realistic representation of the scene or go in a more artistic direction such as a black and white or a colorful soft fairy tale edit, it is completely up to yourself what you choose and what works for you. Many minimalist photos work great in black and white. For me, the most important factor in all editing is I respect the light and make sure that an artificial look does not distract the viewer. Actually, right now, since I released this video during Black Week of 2021, you can get entire $100 off my huge Photoshop for landscape photographers post-processing course. In this course, I progressively introduce you to Photoshop and all the different techniques I use to edit my photos. So whether you're brand new to editing photos or are used to Lightroom, whether you want dramatic edits, calm edits or realistic edits, you should be able to benefit from this course and up your editing skills significantly. Check out the coupon code and link in the description of the video, and if you watch this video after Black Week, there may be another discount available. Also check out the eBooks if you want to learn more about composition, and as always I would highly appreciate both a like and a comment, and hope you enjoyed the video and learned a bit.